Hey, I'm Janet, the CEO and founder of Anvil, and this is the feature guide to standard timelines. If you'd rather read than watch a video, I've linked our Learn guide in the description. That's the best place to go for the most updated support on Anvil. And just a reminder, you can speed up or slow down this tutorial using the YouTube settings. Okay, let's make a timeline. Let's start by creating a standard timeline on Anvil. You'll find the timelines here on the left sidebar. You can see there's an option Timelines and Chronicles. We're going to go for Timelines. If it's your first world, this will of course be empty. And you're going to click this green Create New Timeline button to get started. Add the title of your timeline. I'm going to call mine The History of the Realms. And you can add a description here too. Don't worry about this now. Just click Create Your New Timeline. And here it is. You'll see a little guide here to help you get started. And that takes you to your timeline. Now this is an empty timeline, but let me show you one I made earlier. This is a great opportunity to introduce you to the timelines interface. At the top here, we have the title and the description. As long as you're in edit mode, you will be able to just click on these and edit them directly. You can pop it up with this chevron here. You can also change the cover of your timeline by clicking here and selecting an image from the image gallery or uploading one here. And you can revert to the default image, that's this one you see at the back, at any time just by clicking this button. This central panel here is where you'll see all the eras and the events. You can scroll up and down with your mouse wheel. You could also use these jump buttons. More about this panel in a second. And you can see here there's a mini map that you can drag around. These colored bars show the different eras on my timeline and help you quickly navigate and visualize your time. Since we're talking about navigating the timeline, there's a search bar and a filter bar up here as well. You can filter your events by tags. You'll see the tags that you've used here. You can filter by type of event and also by importance of an event. All of that is settable within your events themselves. You can also filter by subscriber group. And perhaps most importantly, you can search your timeline. So you can search the titles and hop straight to an event. By the way, this isn't just available in edit mode for you. This is available for your viewers as well, so they can quickly navigate everything that's going on in your world. Over here on the left, we have essentially the information bar. So if I click on an event, in edit mode, I can click directly to edit any of these things. We'll be talking more about that later. And in view mode, this is what your viewers will see. They just see the information that you've decided to put into here. And finally, in view mode, you can see the community and the comments and stuff right here, and the stats, and you can notify your followers of updates as you can everywhere on Anvil. And there's a little sharing panel. And most importantly, if you click this question mark, it will take you to the Learn section where you can find all the help that you will need, and probably this video too. In edit mode, you'll see lots of options for creation, and we're going to go through those right now. So we're back in our first timeline that we've created, our empty timeline, and it's time to start by creating some events. First of all, make sure that you're in edit mode by clicking this big edit button. You can swap between those at any time by clicking the I to go to view mode and the edit button to go to edit mode. Next up, click this plus button and you'll have the option to create your first historical event. Give your event a title and you can select a start year. I'm going to leave mine at year 0 for now. And you can select, if you want, an end year. Then just click the create button. Once you've created your event, you'll see this popover bar with all of the details that you can edit. But let me show you something really cool. I'm going to pop it back with this chevron. And now I'm going to create a second event. Again, I'm going to click the button. This time, because my timeline now has a time ribbon, I can use my mouse wheel to scroll around, and you can see the start year is changing automatically as I do this. This means instead of having to guess what happens when, I can visually decide how far apart I want my events to be. Now is a great time to pause the tutorial and create a few events of your own just to try it out. Next, let's talk about eras. Eras denote a period of time in your world. For the timeline of a kingdom, an era might denote the reign of a king, for example, Henry VIII, or it might be a dynasty of several kings, for example, the whole Tudor line. That depends on what suits your world and your timeline best. In the world of Game of Thrones, you might use eras to track the seasons, those super long summers and winters that can last decades. Tolkien's timeline uses ages. These are effectively eras, like the First Age, the Second Age, and the Third Age in his world building. To create an era on your timeline, click and hold the plus button to reveal this extra menu. You can also click this tiny little chevron button that will reveal the same thing. Clicking this button will create a regular era, which is what we're going to do right now. Add a title and a start year and an end year as well. And by the way, scrolling to reposition the time does work on eras as well as on historical events. And then click Create. Here is the era we just created. I will just move this out the way. More on that later. You can see it here on the time ribbon and here on the mini-map. Let's add a couple more eras to give some context to our time. You'll notice here that you cannot create an era if it overlaps with another era. My Time of the Cataclysm era ended at 20, so my Dark Ages era will have to begin at 21. Again, you can see it green here in the time ribbon, and you can see how long it extends in comparison to our first era in the mini-map as well. There's one more era, just to give you the spirit of it. I now have 3 eras in my world. I can scroll them up and down here, and I can also move around on the minimap. This is a great time to pause and create some eras of your own. When you're creating eras, just a note that there are 2 special kinds of eras you can create. This era is the starting era of your world. That means it doesn't need to have a start date. This is very useful when you're creating the mists of time, the primordial past, if you haven't decided where things start, and it gives you the ability to accordion back in time as you want to. The other thing, in the same vein, is this, the current era. This is the modern time, the now moment of the world you're creating. This doesn't have to have an end date. So this again gives you the ability to move forward into the future without creating more and more eras. It will expand as more events take place in your world. If you've been following along, you'll already have a few events and a few eras on your timeline. Let's talk about the details that you can add to your eras. Up here at the top, you can edit the title of your era. If you mouse over, you can see Select Image and Revert to Default Image. This is the default image, and if you click Select Image, again, like with the header of your timeline, this is the same for events as well, you can upload an image in this space from your PC, or select from images you've uploaded previously. And just a hint, the way that I got those animated timelines was by uploading a GIF to my timeline instead. You can see the cover of the era that is displayed up here also becomes the background of the era space along here. Let's remove that for now. You can adjust the start year and the end year here. You can also add an alternative display date. This will override your standard display range in numbers. I've done that on this timeline, for example. The first era of my timeline was simply called the beginning. Instead of putting in thousands of years into the past and leaving a big hole, I used the alternative display date eons ago. You can also use this to denote uncertainty about when an event happened. For example, circa 334, or if an event happened, like the birth of Hercules according to Pliny, for example. I'm going to remove my alternate display date for now because I want to show you era attribution. In our world, we have AD, Anno Domini, and BC, before Christ. You can add era abbreviations for every era on your timeline. The description of your era is basically the description. What happened? What makes this era an era? For example, is this the reign of a particular king? Is this the era of a particular technology? Or perhaps the era of a particular disaster? You can use some basic BB code here in the description, including some basic formatting, image, and article embeds. Here's the full list, and it's also in the Learn section article for you. The initial color of your era is random. It's the color that shows up here on the timeline ribbon and also here in the minimap. This color will automatically color all the events in your era as well. But all of this is customizable. Here, you can pick the era color either from the preselects or by typing in the hex code that you want. The display range in header toggle allows you to toggle on and off whether the time range displays in the header of your era. The next era settings are for if you want to get really fancy with the way you calculate time. Invert BCE dates means essentially instead of counting from 0 to 20, the era will calculate from 20 to 1. It's flipped the way it calculates to be from the higher number to the lower number. Just like in the Western calendar, in BC, 5 BC comes before 0 BC. The other option is to start counting an era from the year 1. In history, this is sometimes done with regnal years. So, year 3 of the reign of King Tut, year 5 of the reign of King Bodger. You can do that by resetting the count offset, either restarting dates at 1 or restarting dates at 0. Here, after the years of the Cataclysm, the Dark Ages starts counting again at the year 1. Now what's really cool is you'll notice when I create a new event, it tells me not only the year on the timeline, which you can also see here, but the year that that corresponds to within the era that I have set the event. As I move around, you can see, again, this moves around too. And if I add an end year, you can see it shows me that as well. This is really helpful because it allows you to understand the reference that people in your world will use when they're talking about these events. Finally, if you want to delete an era, select it, and you can click this Delete Entry button here. There is a reminder that crops up because deletion is a destructive action. You will lose all of your settings and your description if you delete an era. Just a reminder. Now let's have a look at the settings of historical events. A lot of this works exactly the same way as eras, but there are a few differences. Historical events can have tags. You click this tag button and you can write in the tags that you want, and you'll also see a list of the tags that you've already used in the timeline. Click the button to create. This is our historical event here. Watch what happens when I slide the column slider. Pretty cool, right? There are 11 columns on your timeline, and you can move this easily back and forwards. There's a lot of cool different ways to use this. For example, you can use one column for each kind of technology in a technology tree. You could use different columns for different factions, or even for different species or races. Like with eras, you can control the start year and the end year, but you also have options to do month and day. And if you click this button, you can do hour and minute as well. Event type has a lot of options for you to select. Choosing a different event type changes the icon in the center of your event. Event importance also changes the shape of your pin. You can see a full collection of the pin shapes right here. Event importance is something that is filterable up here, type and importance both. So this is something that can really help people navigate your timeline. Unlike eras, events can be private or public. If an event is private, you can also add subscriber groups. Check out the video at the top of this for more information about how subscriber groups and advanced privacy settings work on World Anvil. Historical events can also have articles attached to them. I'm going to attach a character, an organization, and a few other things too. Let's add a quick description. And just a reminder, you can use Control K at any time to search for things in your world. and grab the BBCode link so you can pop it wherever you need it. Now, let's have a look. This is how your historical event will look to viewers of your world. Your readers can click on these and they'll open in a new tab. The final important thing to know about historical events is that they can appear in more than one timeline. Here, you can add them to multiple timelines if you wish. You can see everything they appear in by clicking the drop down, and if you want to remove them, just click the X. At the very bottom, you can write secret things. This is a special panel where you, as a game master, can write things that you don't want your audience to know about this event. That might be secret history elements or things you want to reveal over the course of an RPG game. I've added a secret about where the wheel actually came from. When you're viewing a historical event with GM seeds, you can click here to reveal and hide them. Only you and your co-authors will be able to see this. Your secrets are safe with us. To delete a historical event at any time, scroll all the way to the bottom and click the Delete entry. Again, remember it will delete all of your content. You can also click Remove Entry to take it off this timeline but keep it stored in your world. That will allow you to reattach the historical event to another timeline later. Now let's talk about embedding your timeline and your historical events in your world. To get your timeline embed, click Copy Timeline Link, then just paste it into an article. Here's how it looks in the view mode. If instead you want a custom title for your timeline, select Copy Link with Custom Title, and again, simply paste it into your article. Where it says Your Timeline Here, write the title that you want. Here's how that looks in the view mode. You can also embed historical events. Up here, you'll find the clipboard icon, and again, you can copy it into an article, and it will appear like this, with the default title, and if you mouse over it, you'll be able to see the description as well. You'll notice, though, that this article has a special panel, Related Historical Events. That comes from the fact that I listed the introduction to my world as a related article for the invention of the wheel. The system knows that, so it presents invention of the wheel as a default related article. Now you understand how to create historical events and eras, let's talk about the big timeline settings. As I mentioned earlier, this big switch will take you from timescale mode to list mode and back again. Here's what our timeline looks like in list mode. This setting, year to start timeline on, defines when the timeline loads. At which point, at which year during the timeline does the timeline open. So if I decide I want the timeline to open in the Dark Ages, I'll set it to the moment that that era begins. You can control the color of the default timeline ribbon in the center right here. You can also choose whether or not to display your timeline in the table of contents of your world. If you want to, you can select a related calendar from your world. Check out the video on calendars that we have for more on that. You can also select a default related article and a default related category in your world. This will link your timeline to that content as well. Over on this side, you can set your entire timeline to public or private rather than just individual historical events. And if it's private, you can also choose subscriber groups who have access to your timeline. Finally, you can change your default background image here. You can see it remains static as you scroll. If you've selected other background images for your eras, those will show over the top of your default background image. And if you want to delete your timeline, you can click the Delete Timeline button. Again, remember that when you delete a timeline, you will lose all of your eras. You will not lose your historical events. You can find those historical events at any time by going to Timelines and Chronicles and clicking List All Events under Standard Timelines. That will take you to a complete inventory of all of the historical events in your world. From here, you can also edit your historical events, add them to additional timelines, and you can edit any options you could also edit from the timeline view. So if you've gotten this far, you're already an expert with timelines. Congratulations. I want to show you one more thing that is so super cool. So you can see here that I've created a whole bunch of events in the same year. By default, the system's going to put those on different columns so they don't overlap. But what happens if we get them to all overlap each other? In order to do that, I'm going to move each of these events using the column slider over here to lap over this longer event, which is a war I have going on. You can see that now instead of an icon appearing in the historical event, there is a number. And that creates its own miniature timeline. Here's how it looks in the view mode. In this panel, you'll always see the first event. And then in the secondary panel, you'll see all the events that are within this numbered cluster listed consecutively by start date. So here I've created a revolt, a military action essentially. I've got several other battles along this timeline, and here, where I have many battles happening within a single year, you can see the full list. I am so excited about this. You could do this with the lives of characters and the events within their lives. You could do this with organizations and major events within organizations. It's a really clever way to represent larger events with smaller sub-events within an overarching timeline. And again, you can see I've called my era the Summer of War. This is the first Mortals Revolt, which I could similarly put other events along to represent battles and skirmishes and other things going on, just like I have done here. I don't know about you guys, but I love this little feature on timelines. And that is the feature guide to timelines. Folks, let me know in the chat how you found this tutorial. I'm experimenting with a new style. You can, of course, find all of this information written down over on the Learn section. You can reach that simply by clicking the question mark on your timeline to get straight to the timeline guide, or you can go to the top of the website and click the Learn button, and that will take you to the entire Learn section, which is also, by the way, full of user workflows and guides for every feature. Let me know in the comments of this video if there's something I missed. Let me know if you have a question, and me or my team will try and get to that as soon as we can. And of course, if this video has been helpful, please whack that like button. It really, really helps us perpetuate through the algorithm and helps people find us, basically. Yeah. All right, guys, you know what to do. Now grab your hammer and go world build.